with all tech startups, that has to be what can you put in the marketplace quickly. And sometimes first to market may not be the best.
We try to push the technology to the market. And when that gets into the market and the market is like, no, we actually didn't ask what I say. We don't need it. Yeah.
So you mentioned investors and they might not align with a vision. That's one thing that could go wrong. What is like the one thing that you wish you knew going in that you were going to use if you had to start today?
You need all the money that you can get as much as possible.
Hello and welcome back to the Coding Culture Podcast, the podcast all about technological innovations, cutting-edge practices that drive our digital landscape. Today I'll be joined by a panel of experts that will be taking us through their journey in entrepreneurship, giving us the do's and the don'ts of what to do in a tech startup. I'll be joined by Michael Collins, the general manager at Bet Software. With over 25 years of experience, he is key to keeping Bet innovative. I'm also joined by Moffat, founder of Designative. He's done and worked on a lot of projects at Bet Software and is a trailblazer in the space. We are also joined by Philani. He is also a founder of Wavesoft. They do everything from website development to cloud-first solutions. Welcome to the podcast, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice to have you, and I really hope that we'll be learning a lot from you guys here. I think we'll kick it off with, when we say a tech startup, what is it and what is the difference between that and any other small business or business model out there?
Here we go.
What is the difference between a tech startup and another business?
Yes.
For me, I think these two could probably explain it better than I can. But for me, the difference is that in some ways your leap of faith is into digital, so you don't know how it's going to be received, and you have to be able to show something that people want quickly. And then look at all the spaces and see how you can add value digitally into spaces. I think a tech startup has to have that as their mission first and foremost.
Okay, so I think, Philani, on your side now, when you have Wavesoft and I start my little puzzle shop, what would be the difference between the two of us?
Well, I think mostly the tech startups are influenced by innovation. There's always especially, in the current days, modern days, there's always problems that requires technical solutions to be resolved. So from an entrepreneur point of view, it's always about, applying the digital solutions to actually address those problems. And that's how we can establish a startup. Meanwhile, on on other businesses like the retail, your manufacturing and other nature of businesses, they are just mostly adding on platforms that are already in place. And their mission is mostly to expand maybe like regional and local. Meanwhile, startups, there's always like a vision to expand in a global level.
Okay, speaking of vision, I think it takes a very interesting kind of person to actually try to dive in because there's risk involved. Moffat, on your side, what do you think is from a mission and vision perspective when starting a startup, what should people be thinking about?
I think the first thing is it has to be something useful. You're going to have to solve a problem because you can't just come up with an idea that doesn't matter to anyone. So that's the first thing. And obviously, in terms of your initial question about the differences with the traditional business, I think we have so many similarities. It's basically the same thing, but only that sometimes with tech startups and this technology kind of businesses, some of the products or the service is not tangible. It's not a physical, real world things that you can touch. It's not like a tomato. Yeah.
Got that. Yeah. So I think, Philani, you mentioned you have to be innovative and technology. In terms of once you've got the company and it started, how do you make sure that the company is innovative and is resilient to the ever-changing market and landscape out there?
I think the key element here is to build around the real problem. There's a lot of cases where we as entrepreneurs view a problem in our own technical understanding. Sometimes we even get excited with the new technology that comes into play, and we try to push the technology to the market. And when that gets into the market, and the market is like, no, we actually didn't answer this. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. And I think when you walk around tech circles, you hear topics like MVP, and I'm not talking about the most valuable player here, but you hear MVP, product market fit. Akil, maybe can you just take our viewers around what is an MVP and why it's so important when you're trying to start something?
So I think an MVP, as described in the tech space, is the minimum viable product. So basically what we all want to do is the return on an investment. I think what is different to a traditional vendor of some kind of retail thing is that the supply chains are so established that the return on cost is calculated quite quickly, versus for a tech startup it could be 1, 2, even 3 years to actually get something to market. So the key here is to get what we call a minimum viable product, something that people can use, and to immediately start seeing some kind of income back into the business, because only through that income can you grow and start adding on to the product. So you create a minimum viable product that people can use and work with, and then you expand on that going forward. If you look at the likes of say like an Amazon, they started off selling books. That was their initial scope, and from then grew into selling everything. But I think without getting that software out to sell books, it would have been, the rest of it would never have been able to follow. So with all tech startups, that has to be, what can you put in the marketplace quickly? And sometimes first to market may not be the best. The market icebreakers, as they were, may deliver something quickly that then primes the market for someone that comes in with something better to take over. So key, making sure that your minimum viable product is going to be good for the market, and it's competitive quickly.
Very interesting. You mentioned like 1, 2, possibly even 3 years there. So in doing that, there's financial implications to this, like buildings, software, people. So when it comes to raising capital, I think, Moffat, let's talk about capital. It's key, clearly, in order to be able to start up and being able to do certain things. Is there such a thing as raising too much capital too early?
I don't think there's such a thing. That's the short answer. Give us as much money as you can. Yes, please. So yeah, I think the problem is actually when you don't raise enough capital, and then you are actually running with constraints, because obviously as a startup you need money to get your initial staff complement. You need money to buy computers. You need money to rent a building or whatever the case may be. So you need all the money that you can get, as much as possible.
Just to play devil's advocate a little bit on that one there's the train of thought that if you have too much capital, you don't bootstrap, and it might limit your thinking. You're already thinking like a big player, whereas you could have been a bit more nimble and figured a few things out with less money to work with.
Yeah, that's a dangerous entrepreneur to start off with. You're still going to have problems even when you do succeed. So your management for financial resources is still going to be required at the early stage, even at the later stage. So if you're failing to manage at the beginning, you're surely not going to manage at the end.
Okay, is everybody in agreement on that?
I think just to add on that, with regards to capital, so if there is external sort of funding, there is likely to be a bit of pressure, especially if it depends on the nature of the funding, obviously. Let's say like it's a funding from investors who are like buying shares, some sort of, should this business succeed, then they do have expectations. So to some degree, then you'll start having that kind of pressure to say, I have to deliver this. And sometimes you may not even now not aligning with the actual investors. Because you had your own vision when you started, now they coming with these other perspectives into the business.
That's a very interesting perspective. I think while we are on that, like, let's maybe move on to your own journeys there. So you mentioned investors, and they might not align with a vision. That's one thing that could go wrong. So in your journey, as you went along, what is like the one thing that you wish you knew going in that you were going to use if you had to start today?
You mean from the funding perspective?
It could be funding, it could be anything. The one thing that you think was most critical for you.
Oh, well, from development side of things, if I had to take some time back, I would start, before development, I'll start engaging the market. We've made a lot of mistakes whereby we start developing solutions that are actually not a requirement to the market. So just to answer your question straight there, I will start with the customer and work backwards.
Okay. Yes. That's very interesting. So I think, so let's say the company it has started. You've got X amount of employees. You start to grow there. Like in anything, there are some MVPs and players that that perform, or team members that perform better than others. So Michael, in your experience, is it better to rely on those team members and try to get them to push as much as possible and still somehow try to avoid burnout? Or what do you do here? Do you try to get everybody somehow to perform at the same level, even if it might be dropping some of your MVPs? I'm talking your Jordans, your Lucas, those kind of players.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one, because I think every startup comes from a point of being small, being intimate, teams that rely on each other massively. And you actually get the feeling when you're working in a team of 15, 20 people on a high-pressure MVP or in a high-pressure situation, that you're much more cohesive. Now, if you look at how businesses grow, once you get to 100 people, 200 people, it becomes much more difficult to keep that sense of urgency, that sense of engagement, that sense of ownership. When there's 15 people, everybody owns everything all of the time. There's no such thing as that I'm not going to help you if you ask me for help, because we all rely on each other so much. As soon as it gets bigger, that sense becomes lost. So I think that's the transition that a lot of companies have, is that how do you keep that sense of urgency to deliver all the time, versus becoming a more of a bank type of culture where people are there from 8 to 5, that their framework around their entire product becomes less urgent for them because they're part of a much bigger picture. So it's a very hard thing to try and manage. Everyone says they want to keep that kind of startup culture all the time, but there is a problem that it's sustainability for burnout, for everything like that, becomes difficult.
Interesting. So on the same thing, as the company is growing there, Moffat, how critical is it to keep getting the customer feedback in the growth, to make sure you don't lose it, where initially you're very close to the product, you're paying attention, you scale, you start to grow, and sometimes companies start having a distance between themselves and the customer. How critical is this feedback loop?
I think it's super critical. Like, I can give you an example. You have to get customer feedback at every step of the process. Like, say you are building a website, for example, and you have to firstly, the mock-up itself, there's a lot of feedback on that. Then there's the next step of the final product. All the steps, you gotta have to get the final feedback, because it's important, because you're not gonna make very expensive adjustments at the end of the product. So that's why you need feedback every step, even every day if you have to.
Okay. Yeah. And just thinking of South Africa and high unemployment that we have, what role do you think like tech startups or an entrepreneurial mindset can play in assisting and growing the economy?
Okay, we heavily rely on interns. So obviously there's a lot of interns out there that coming out of straight out of college, they need jobs, and it's a very good place for an intern to start. Then they obviously progress and develop into a junior developer, also all sorts of things. So I think for a startup, it is a good idea to get interns because they don't come in with that initial expense. Then you train them up to your own what you want them to become with your vision, because they are basically a blank canvas that you can paint in your own image.
That's an interesting approach to it. So I think my question would also be, let's say, like, I'm an intern, I don't have a lot of responsibilities, I don't have a lot of risks, but let's say I've got the talent and I've got an idea. Do you think it's even worthwhile for somebody at that point to actually risk it and start off from school already trying to come up with a product, or do you need to go first into the start of a career, try to understand how the space works, or while you have no responsibilities to really dive in at that point?
I think it's too early. Are you talking about starting the business?
The business itself, yeah.
No, it's too early. You need some experience because it's very risky at that point. There's a lot of life lessons that you haven't gone through, and I think a career gives you the more important stuff also. Yeah.
That inexperience maybe could be the thing that actually drives change as well.
Yeah, maybe. Be right.
I think for yourself there, Michael, if there is 3 must-dos, like when you've scaled, you're at a certain level, you're trying to keep the culture, you're trying not to burn people out, or if there's only 3 critical things in trying to balance the growth and trying to keep people, what would those be for you?
I think it's a kind of a case of what everyone's kind of talking about, is that if you the distance from the customer, you always got to keep it very narrow. So you have to have, even if people are working on a small piece of a big puzzle, they have to understand how critical that piece affects the people that your software is serving. Effectively, all the digital software that we use is to make our lives easier or to entertain us. There's no other reason for it. And in a competitive landscape where, like you say, there's a lot of tech startups. And the one thing about technology is that as our access to the internet grows, as the technology becomes better in even handheld devices, people can now code on pretty much anything. And I think AI is also going to allow that to create those MVPs much faster. If you're not competitive quickly, or you're drifting from your customer base, it doesn't take a lot to disrupt them. If you look at massive industries that have failed because of digital disruption. But to answer your question, keep them close to the customer, make sure they understand what their customer is doing, how they are helping the customer, the overall customer journey, because at the end of the day, the person that's buying the subscription or depositing money into your accounts, that's the person you have to keep satisfied.
That's definitely the case. So Philani, we spoke AI a little bit at the beginning now. In terms of your startup itself, how are you leveraging AI? In which parts of the business are you leveraging AI? Is it all hype? Has it assisted you in anything?
Oh, definitely. I was actually looking at how we do things now compared to how we used to do things back in the days.
You giving away your age already?
Yeah. Yeah, so it does help a lot in terms of simplifying tasks. For an example, we used to rely on Google a lot. On Google there will be a bunch of answers that you are actually...
I was more of a Stack Overflow guy, but okay.
Correct, yes. We're all coming from those things. Yeah, and you rely on page 1. If page 1 is not giving you the answer that you actually want, by the time you get to page 2, you're already kind of discouraged, But with all these tools available nowadays, it really helps a lot to just get straight to it, So it's really helpful. I mean, today I think we're doing stand-ups with the team. We're writing asked the team member to write a user manual. They had no idea where to start, and there was only one way to get out of it. And just use these AI tools, and it will give you a guidance on where to start. But should it have been not there, then yeah, it would have been quite a lengthy process to achieve. Yeah, so it adds a lot of value.
I think that's a wrap for the podcast. I'd like to thank everybody for coming and for giving us insights and the quick bites on trying to move the journey. We had to challenge each other here and there on certain points. I hope that starts and sparks discussions there in the comments there. I'd like to thank you, Michael. Thank you, Moffat. Thank you, Philani, for coming and giving us the do's and the don'ts of a tech startup. So if you enjoyed the content, please go to the comment section there. Let us know what you think. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe there. Also, do make sure to check our previous episodes for all the insights around technology. And remember, stay curious and keep innovating. Signing out.